Have you ever had a neighbor destroy something your deed says you own? I live on what used to be part of a massive farm. The family who owned it had hundreds of acres going back to the 1800s. Over time, they sold pieces off to developers until all that remained was a few acres around the old farmhouse. When my family bought our place in the early 2000s, we got those last 4 or 5 acres. The surrounding land had been sitting mostly untouched since the 1970s, overgrown and quiet. Long before any of that land was sold, the original owners had dug a pond. It wasn't just for looks. They used it for farming, livestock, and backup water. Our property has a well, but it's shallow and depends on the season. That pond was our safety net, and we used it for gardening, small farming projects, and in drought years when the well couldn't keep up. The pond sits just over the property line, technically on the neighbor's land, but when the original owner sold off the big parcel in 1970, they recorded a permanent easement. Our deed says we have the perpetual right to use the pond's water, to install, repair, and replace a water line and pump, and to enter that property to do it. It's not vague, it's spelled out in plain language and recorded with the county. For years, it was no problem. Nobody lived next to the pond, and we quietly used the water when needed. That changed a few years ago. Someone bought the 40 acres next door, built a big new house, and immediately started tearing out the woods and clearing everything into one giant, perfectly manicured lawn. While they were clearing, they came across our water line and pump. Instead of asking about it, they destroyed it with a bulldozer and shoved the twisted mess of metal and pipe onto our land in a heap. At the time, I told myself it must have been a mistake. I didn't want to start trouble with someone who was already known to be aggressive. This past year was different. It was one of the driest summers we'd had in a while, and the well was already struggling. We were gearing up for our yearly garden and needed that pond water. I walked up to the pond to check it out and figure out how to replace the line. Not long after, I found a letter thrown on my doorstep. It wasn't a neighborly note. It was a threat. They wrote that if I ever went near the pond again, they'd take legal action. And if I ever set up another water line or pump, they'd destroy it, just like last time. That was the first time they openly admitted it had been deliberate. A few days later, I ran into the guy's wife while walking. I tried to keep it civil. I told her the water line was there when we bought our house, and that our deed clearly gives us water rights. She looked at me and said, "Be thankful it was a letter and not in person." The tone made it clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a warning. That's when I decided to get serious. I went to the town records office and pulled every single deed for both properties, going all the way back to the 1970 sale. Every single transfer since then referred back to that original deed, the one that says, "The party of the first part, his successors and assigns, shall have the perpetual right to use the water from the pond, and to lay, repair, and or replace pipes, and to enter, to do so." It didn't matter how many times the land had been sold or how much the new owner disliked it. That right was permanent. It's not a favor. It's a legal obligation tied to the land itself. The only way to remove it would have been for a previous owner of my property to formally give it up in writing. That never happened. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear this wasn't an accident. They didn't just want to stop us from using the pond. They wanted to erase a legal right that had been in place for more than 50 years. Destroying the line wasn't just petty. It was likely illegal. So I've gathered everything. The deeds, photos of the destruction, the threatening letter, even my notes from that conversation with his wife. I'm turning it over to a lawyer. The goal isn't revenge. I just want my access back, and I want them legally barred from touching our equipment again. If they won't respect the easement, the court will make them. And once there's an injunction in place, they won't have the chance to do it just like last time. This right was here long before they showed up, and it'll still be here long after they're gone.